Imagine you just had one of the most incredible role-playing experiences ever. It was emotional, intense, perhaps even gut-wrenching. And now you get why people love role-playing so much. For the next few days, it's all you can think about because what a story you told with your friends. But then you realize maybe a week later, you realize that it's getting to you. Somehow, the emotions of your fictional character in your game of pretend have invaded the real world. Welcome to the club. You have just experienced what many role players call bleed. I'm Dr. Keel McFarland, clinical psychologist, artist, and theologian. In this video, we're going to do a deep dive into what is bleed and why does it happen. If you're curious about the psychology of role-playing games, subscribe and consider supporting as I launch the Shadowright Project channel. This is the first of my RPG Psych series, where I will do a deep dive into the psychology of role-playing games. But I have a lot planned for in-depth, research-supported videos on the psychology and eventually even the spirituality of play. Stick around to learn more and to get updates about the other various projects we're working on. So what is bleed? The term bleed was coined in 2007 by Emily Kerr Boss, and the simplest way to define it is that bleed happens when things like feelings or behaviors spill from the player to the character or vice versa. I started the video with an example of when something happens to your character and it affects everyday life. Maybe your character's best friend died and it gets to you, or maybe they betrayed you, your character, your character. See that's bleed. It's like when you have a dream that someone you know slapped you, and then you wake up pissed off at them. The opposite is when real life affects your story or your game. Perhaps you had a horrible day at your job, and your boss was a total jerk to you for no reason at all, and then that night, playing Dungeons and Dragons with your friend, you find yourself wanting to murder everything and everyone, and especially people with power. That's also bleed. Some people will separate out positive versus negative bleed. Negative bleed is when difficult emotions from your character stick around with you after the event, and positive bleed is the opposite, when joyful or confident or excited feelings spill between the player and the character. And an example of positive bleed would be that if your character has a victory and does something really, really well, the next week or even month, you might feel more confident. That's positive bleed. In addition to positive or negative bleed, researchers have identified several main types of bleed that role players experience, though I'm sure there are more and that these categories overlap. Emotional bleed is the classic bleed when emotions seep from the character into the player and vice versa. Your character had a win, you feel happy for the next week. You lost your job in real life, your character feels depressed. Procedural bleed, however, is when physical habits or behaviors transfer between player and character. It could be a pattern of speech, a limp, or a specific mannerism, or even as physical posturing, like your character slinking around or strutting down the road. Mimetic bleed is different, and mimetics have to do with imitation. This sort of bleed is about ideas and philosophies, things about values or concepts, convictions, or ways of viewing other people or things, or how the world works, or how it should work. Ego bleed. This is when the personality of the character or the player seeps over across into the other. There are many stories of players creating outgoing or confident characters, and then having helpful bleed or positive bleed and feeling more confident in real life. Identity bleed. This is similar, but at a much deeper level, more personal level. This is where central aspects of the player or the character, their very sense of self, affects the other. This is where the player and the character's core identities might merge or shift. Emancipatory bleed. This is a more specific type of bleed for when players from marginalized groups in real life experience a sense of freedom from that rejection through their characters. This type of bleed often goes along with stories of revolution or of destroying oppressive systems. And finally, relationship bleed. Oh yeah, that one. This is when two characters have a relationship that impacts their real life relationship or vice versa. A subcategory is romantic bleed. Yeah. When players feel attracted to fictional characters, or when players pretending to be in a romantic relationship then out of character go and have fun with it. This bleed often goes along with very intense role-playing scenes, understandably, and this likely also makes the bleed that much more intense. Some researchers argue that everyone experiences bleed, but that some players will notice it while others just don't. Hugas called this a bleed perception threshold, meaning that the emotional seeping has to be intense enough for the player to notice it, and some people are just more sensitive than others. I personally am not sure if every player experiences bleed, because I know many LARPers who play at events, and they play it just like a video game or a sports game, and they aren't really emotionally invested in their characters at all. There's nothing wrong with these play styles. They're just different ways to play. Some there's emotions, some there's not. The term bleed is really only used in this way in the role-playing game world, and specifically LARPing or live-action role-playing, but similar feelings are experienced by actors as they play their characters. Role-playing games are quite literally acting, it's playing pretend role-playing, so it makes sense that there would be some related experiences here. There are some important differences, though, for role-playing games, because they often run for extended periods of time, sometimes even for years, while acting roles rarely, if ever, last for that long. Role-playing game characters are usually made by the players themselves, and this is an important difference because the character is born from the player's creativity. It is far more a part of the player than the typical actor's role, even when the actor really throws himself fully into their character. The role-playing game character is truly a part of the player because their character is a projection of themselves. LARPs present an even more increased connection that is different from tabletop role-playing games like D&D. LARPers play as their characters for extended periods of time in character, from several straight hours to over a week sometimes. Tabletop role-playing games can run for several hours, but usually the role-playing scenes are relatively short, and it's easy to step in and out of character. Even actors have role-play moments in bursts of scenes where they step back and forth over that threshold between character and real life. But LARPs can be profoundly immersive, where the embodiment of the character just goes on and on and on. For days sometimes. This increases the intensity and the frequency of feelings in general, but it also increases the possibility of bleed. So why? Why does this happen? When a role-play scenario brings up feelings of excitement or fear, or any feelings, our bodies experience these feelings as real, even if we logically know that we're playing pretend. These feelings spill wherever they want, even if the logical part of us has everything in nice little neat boxes. Our frontal lobes, or the higher order judgment centers of our neurology in our brains, it can protest all it wants, but the limbic system of our bodies will stubbornly ignore that logic because it knows what it experienced and it felt a lot. But sometimes those boxes in the logic centers, those aren't even so neat. Some players play characters that are very similar to the player themselves, and this makes the line between player and character very muddy. Like I said earlier, this is similar to when you have an intense dream and the next morning you find yourself still feeling very strongly about it. Like the dream, the actions and the interactions of our characters are all experienced by our unconscious mind and our biology. So they're a part of us. And the more embodied that role play is, like comparing a tabletop game versus a live action role playing game, the more intense that feeling will be. So this lets us ask then, is it good or is it bad? I don't like those terms. I have three thoughts here. First, it's not good, it's not bad, it's a feeling. By itself, bleed is an emotion that is simply from a different part of you. It isn't something to freak out about. And I don't mean this in a dismissive way. Feelings are real and they're very valid. But that's all they are. They're feelings. There's nothing wrong with you if you've experienced bleed. If anything, it shows that you're normal and that you are feeling things from something you experienced. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. Secondarily, bleed is an opportunity. Ironically, bleed can be an opportunity to help you understand yourself a bit better. Why did that event get to you so much, or that story moment? Sometimes chewing on what happened and what emotions seeped from fantasy to reality or vice versa can help us get a bit of insight into what's really going on in the deep parts of our psyche. Again, like dreams. There's a reason therapists like talking about dreams, because dreams help us get direct access to our emotions. Role-playing can sometimes do the exact same thing. That said, I do suggest that if you want to do a deep dive into why you're experiencing bleed, this often works best if you have someone to help you walk through those questions, like a therapist. Sometimes role-play can trigger deep trauma. And yes, this is still an opportunity to grow and heal. It's a powerful opportunity. But anything dealing with trauma is best done with a therapist who has had real training in working with trauma. And this is because you want to be able to heal from that trauma and not deepen those wounds. So if you want to do that sort of work, don't do it alone. My last thought on the question of is bleed good or bad is that, yeah, it can be a problem when it gets in the way of everyday life. This is normally what people mean when they talk about bleed in general. The emotional impact of a game can be brutal sometimes, especially if it's a dark game with violent themes. Bleed like this does feel wrong and bad because we feel like we should be able to contain those feelings because it's just a game. I actually disagree here. If anything, the fact that someone is emotionally troubled by a scene involving death, violence, or even betrayal, that tells me that that person has some solid ethics. We should be troubled by such things. And again, the biology and the neurology, they don't know the difference between roleplay and real life. So it's troubling, yeah. Adding to this, when we experience trauma in real life, the frontal lobe of our brain, it goes offline. And this is the reasoning parts of our brain. Again, the judgment centers. So that's the normal response to trauma in real life. So if in a game we're confronted with death, even pretend death, and it's exciting and scary, it's possible, or it's likely even, that in this state, the part of our minds that can tell the difference between play and reality, it might not even be there. As in the fight, flight, or freeze part of our minds, it takes over. And then afterwards, those traumatized feelings of I was confronted with violence and I felt it, those feelings kind of free float through our minds because they're not anchored to that event by the judgment parts of our brain. The judgment part wasn't online at that time. Now, this is an extreme example of what might be happening in a very traumatic bleed moment. And of course, these sort of things do not happen in every situation. I bring it up to illustrate that even in this extreme example, the biology is behaving correctly by shutting down higher order thought to help the body survive to live another day. This is a defense mechanism that is hardwired into the humans, into ourselves. And this has helped our species survive for millennia. Even in this case, the problem is not that bleed happened. This brings us to really a big question then. It isn't a problem that emotions splash wherever they want. The problem comes in what do we do with that bleed when it does interfere, either with everyday life or with our game. This question is big enough that it deserves its own video. This is going to be the very next video that I'm doing in this series. If you want an academic resource on the psychology of role-playing games, much of the information in this video was pulled from Transformative Role-Playing Game Design, edited by Sarah Lynn Bowman. Check her out. She's got a lot of resources. And Electra Diacalambrianu, I apologize if I'm saying that wrong, and Simon Brent. It's a wonderful textbook filled with information about role-playing games and some of the psychology behind it. I'll put a link to this resource down in the description below. Thank you for staying with me through this video. Please leave me a comment below about a time you experienced bleed and what you did about it. I will absolutely be reading those comments and thinking about them as I make the next video. Thank you so much, and I'll see you there.